Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is Rajesh Lake and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह आज भी हम देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आप तक लाएंगे और उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज स्टूडियो में आमंत्रित हैं बिजनेस स्टैंडर्ड के एडिटोरियल डायरेक्टर ए.के. भट्टाचार्य। भट्टाचार्य जी, मार्केट मंत्र में आपका स्वागत।
नमस्कार, वार्म वेलकम।
थैंक यू। सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ राजेश।
Union Cabinet approves $808 million World Bank assisted program on raising and accelerating MSME performance. Sensex climbed more than 1% to settle above 58,600 points. Nifty finishes near the 17,500 mark. The rupee appreciates to 75 paise and 91 paise per US dollar, and Brent crude prices rise to around 2% on supply tightness and growing prospects of Western sanctions on Russia.
केंद्रीय मंत्रिमंडल ने सूक्ष्म, लघु और मध्यम उद्यम एमएसएमई क्षेत्र के प्रदर्शन में सुधार और तेजी लाने के लिए 6,000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक के विश्व बैंक सहायता कार्यक्रम को मंजूरी दी। सेंसेक्स 1% से अधिक के उछाल से 58,600 अंक से ऊपर हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 17,500 के करीब पहुंचा। रुपया मजबूत होकर 75 रुपए 91 पैसे प्रति डॉलर पर हुआ बंद और आपूर्ति में कमी तथा रूस पर प्रतिबंध बढ़ाए जाने की आशंकाओं से ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतों में करीब 2% का उछाल।
And now the news. The Union Cabinet today approved $808 million or over 6,062 crore rupees World Bank assisted program on raising and accelerating MSME performance, RAMP. It is a new scheme and will commence in financial year 2022-23. Around $500 million will be a loan from the World Bank, and the remaining $308 million would be funded by the Government of India. RAMP is a World Bank-assisted central sector scheme supporting various COVID resilience and recovery intervention of the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. The program aims at improving access to market and credit, strengthening institutions and governance at the center and state level, improving center-state linkages and partnerships, addressing issues of delayed payments and greening of MSMEs. The RAMP program will also seek to scale up implementation capacity and MSME coverage in states. AKB, this is a very good initiative that has come up. We would like you to elaborate on RAMP that we're talking about, which is raising and accelerating MSME performance.
Yes, I think the context is very important. The context is how the 2 years long COVID pandemic ravaged and almost undermined the backbone of the MSME economy. And as you would know, that the micro, medium, small units in this country, the number is really huge. About 63 million units are registered in different parts of the country. Maharashtra tops the list. And when MSME sector were ravaged by COVID, they lost their market share, they lost their employees. So in every possible way, the MSME, a very important segment of the Indian economy, was adversely affected. The government in the last 2 years has come out with many schemes, many provisions of credit facilities, as well as ensuring that those MSME units can get back to their earlier status. Now, this scheme, which is World Bank assisted, as you pointed out, will actually address the critical credit needs of the MSME sectors. And I think the larger units, which is the small units, which account for about 35,000 units in this country, will actually be hugely benefited, because remember that almost 20% of India's urban workforce, this is non-agricultural workforce, are employed in these MSMEs. So this is a huge benefit, potential benefit for these employees, because once the credit facilities are back with these MSME units, they would be able to come back into business, and the immediate positive fallout would be in the jobs economy, which is that people will probably start getting back calls for jobs, and the migration that we saw into the villages will probably be reversed. And equally important would be the demand for rural jobs, as reflected in the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee figures, will probably come down a little bit, reflecting that the workers who had gone out of the MSME sector to their villages and looking for NREGA jobs are now back into the MSME sector. So I think the scheme's potential impact on reviving the MSME economy would be substantial, and one has to see the rollout of the scheme in the coming financial year.
So RAMP is primarily going to bring back, as you just said, the spirit of entrepreneurship amongst the people, those who have gone back to the villages. Am I right in my understanding?
Absolutely. Because what happens is that, out of 63 million MSMEs, almost 99% are micro and small units. Now, out of those 99% of MSME units, the micro ones have a employee base of maybe 5 or 10 or 3 or 2. Now, when the availability of credit is not an issue anymore with this segment, because remember, this large chunk of small micro units, almost around 62 million units are micro units in this country.
Okay.
Now, when they have the advantage and the comfort of credit availability, they go out and they become a little more entrepreneurial, which was affected during the COVID time. And many of them went back to the villages looking for the NREGA job support. Now, probably they will, with the support of this credit, they should come back.
जी, भट्टाचार्य जी, क्रेडिट की अवेलेबिलिटी की आपने बात की, इसके अलावा भी क्या आप और भी चुनौतियां देखते हैं एमएसएमई सेक्टर के सामने, और ये जो RAMP का जो आज जो इनिशिएटिव सरकार ने लिया है, क्या ये उनको पूरी तरीके से एड्रेस कर पाएगा?
देखिए, ये सवाल बहुत ही तात्पर्यपूर्ण है। मैं समझता हूं कि जो एमएसएमई यूनिट का क्रेडिट की उसको उपलब्ध कराने का एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज तो है, और वो चैलेंज को मैं समझता हूँ ये रैम्प थोड़ी बहुत मदद देगा। पर उससे ज्यादा एक जो चैलेंज जो है वो कि एमएसएमई यूनिट में की जो डिमांड की जो है वो, क्योंकि हमारे अर्थनीति में ग्रोथ सस्टेनेबल तभी होगी जब हम कंजम्पशन डिमांड को हम और भी दुरुस्त कर सकेंगे, दृढ़ कर सकेंगे। और मैं समझता हूं कि ये कंजम्पशन डिमांड के साथ एमएसएमई सेक्टर बहुत ओतप्रोत से जड़ित है, और अगर हम एमएसएमई सेक्टर की डिमांड की अगर उसकी जो रिकवरी रिवाइवल की तरफ ध्यान न दें, हमें शायद एमएसएमई की जो एडवांटेज मिलेगा इस क्रेडिट अवेलेबिलिटी से वो पूरा नहीं होगा।
जी, बढ़ते हैं अगली खबर की ओर। वाणिज्य और उद्योग मंत्री पीयूष गोयल ने संयुक्त अरब अमारात के कारोबारी समुदाय को भारत में व्यापार के लिए उपलब्ध अवसरों का लाभ उठाने के लिए आमंत्रित किया है। श्री गोयल दुबई में एक्सपो 2020 में भारत के सम्मान दिवस समारोह में बोल रहे थे। उन्होंने कहा कि भारत कारोबार के लिए पर्याप्त कौशल और निवेशक अनुकूल नीतियां उपलब्ध कराता है। अधिकांश क्षेत्रों में 100% प्रत्यक्ष विदेशी निवेश की अनुमति है। श्री गोयल ने कहा कि भारत में उद्योग को बढ़ावा देने के लिए कई नई पहल की गई हैं, जिसमें उत्पादन आधारित प्रोत्साहन योजना और मेक इन इंडिया देश में कारोबार को सुगम बनाने के लिए हैं।
This ease of doing business that the minister has communicated to the business community in UAE, particularly the production-linked incentive scheme and Make in India scheme, is certainly going to give a huge impetus to bringing them over to India to conduct their business.
Of course, I mean, I think you have to see these statements and measures in the larger context of a strategic economic context of how India is building its economic relations on a firmer footing with United Arab Emirates. You will probably know that already in 2021-22 financial year, UAE has become India's second biggest export market, replacing China. Number one. Number two, the government has already allowed UAE to take part in the government's procurement program, which is a special facility and an access given to only one foreign country, which means that firms registered in UAE, located in UAE, can take part and compete with Indian companies for supply of goods and services to government procurement initiatives. That is number two. And number three is the free trade arrangement that is being put in place will also mean that there's a lot of opportunities of trade, and of course there is investment opportunities out there. So I think what the minister said has to be seen in the larger context of a stronger, stable and growing relationship between India and UAE. And I'm not going into the political significance of coming closer to UAE on economic matters.
Okay. Moving on, the Union Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has approved release of an additional installment of 3% of dearness allowance, DA, to central government employees and dearness relief to pensioners from the 1st of January this year. This will be over the existing rate of 31% of the basic pay or pension to compensate for the price rise. The combined impact on the exchequer in this regard will be 9,544.50 crore rupees per annum, and this will benefit 47.68 lakh central government employees and 68.62 lakh pensioners.
जी, और अब रुख करते हैं शेयर बाजार का। सकारात्मक वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच आज सेंसेक्स में 1% से अधिक की तेजी दर्ज हुई, जबकि निफ्टी 1% लाभ में रहा। सेंसेक्स 58,600 से ऊपर बंद हुआ, जबकि निफ्टी 17,500 के स्तर के नजदीक जा पहुंचा। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 1.28% की वृद्धि से 740 अंक बढ़कर 58,684 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 173 अंक के उछाल से 1% बढ़कर 17,498 पर बंद हुआ। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.78% चढ़ा और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 1.09% की बढ़त में रहा।
The Sensex today climbed more than 1%, while the Nifty gained 1%. Both stock indices rose amid positive cues from global share markets. The BSE Sensex closed above 58,600 points, while the NSE Nifty ended near the 17,500 mark. The Sensex climbed 740 points or 1.28% to close at 58,684. The Nifty also surged 173 points or 1% to settle at 17,498. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap rose 0.78% and the small-cap index ended 1.09% up. In the Sensex Pack, 21 companies logged gain while 9 declined. Bajaj Finserv gained the most as it rose 3.8%, followed by Bajaj Finance, which added 3.1%. Mahindra & Mahindra climbed 2.6% and Power Grid surged 2.5%. On the other hand, ITC declined 2.2%, Tata Steel fell 2%, and Tech Mahindra ended 1.7% down. In sectoral indices at BSE, 12 indices gained while 7 witnessed losses. Finance gained the most as it added 1.7%. Realty rose 1.5% and BankX climbed 1.4%. On the other hand, Metal Index lost as it slipped 2.9%. Oil and gas declined 0.9% and the basic materials fell 0.6%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was positive as shares of 2,083 companies gained while 1,322 fell. Shares of 102 companies remained unchanged. AKB, can you talk us through about the recent market moves where we are witnessing that despite bad news from Ukraine, Fed hike, bond yields, crude prices, the markets are rallying?
Well, it's an interesting question that you have raised. I think what has happened today, particularly, is an outcome of some sort of a de-escalation, hope of a de-escalation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and also there are signs that the crude oil price may actually not skyrocket to newer, higher levels. So today's market development must be seen in the context of what happened today. It should not be read or interpreted as a signal for the larger market sentiment or trend. So therefore, we have to sort of restrain our enthusiasm or excitement over what happened in the markets today, because this is a reflection of the hope that the conflict may be seeing some signs of hope on the horizon.
Or receding.
Yeah.
We'll continue our discussion after this short commercial break.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से।
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान।
अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग।
डायल कीजिए 870-001-4242।
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 870-001-4242।
कार्यक्रम में आपका फिर स्वागत है। हम चर्चा कर रहे थे शेयर बाजार के ऊपर और भट्टाचार्य जी आपसे ही जानना चाहेंगे, आज अगर हम शेयर बाजार की चाल प्रदर्शन को देखें तो फाइनेंस सेक्टर के बाद जो है सबसे अधिक जो तेजी आज दिखाई पड़ी वो रियल्टी सेक्टर में 1.5% की तेजी आज देखने को मिली रियल्टी शेयरों में। रियल्टी शेयरों में जो अभी जो आपको लगता है कि अभी जो मूल्यांकन है, जो वैल्यूएशन है, वो क्या सही है, और जिस तरीके से इनपुट कॉस्ट बढ़ रही है और इसका भार जो है कंपनियां, रियल्टी कंपनियां अब ग्राहकों पर की तरफ डाल रही हैं या ग्राहकों के ऊपर डाल रही हैं, अगले कुछ महीनों में ब्याज को लेकर के या होम लोन की दरों को लेकर भी संभावित बढ़ोतरी की बात कही जा रही है, तो ऐसे में क्या इस सेक्टर की ग्रोथ इसी तरीके से सस्टेन होते हुए आप देखते हैं या इसमें कुछ?
आपने जो कहा, जो रियल्टी सेक्टर का जो मीडियम टर्म या शॉर्ट टर्म में अगर आप प्रोजेक्शन देखते हैं तो उम्मीद की जा सकती है कि रियल्टी सेक्टर में जो डिमांड डिस्ट्रक्शन जो हुआ था जी पिछले 1-2 साल में, और वो डिमांड डिस्ट्रक्शन ज्यादातर कमर्शियल रियल्टी में हुआ था। जिस तरह से कोविड संक्रमण का जो गति जो कम हो रही है और आशा लोग कर रहे हैं कि शायद कोविड के से छुटकारा मिलने की हम उम्मीद कर सकते हैं, जो सेक्टर सबसे ज्यादा इसमें से बेनिफिट मिलेगा वो है आपका commercial realty sector, commercial realty sector. तो मुझे लगता है जो रियल्टी सेक्टर में जो आप जो गति देख रहे हैं वो कमर्शियल रियल्टी सेक्टर का रिफ्लेक्शन दिख रहा है, रेसिडेंशियल का नहीं.
Vishal, let's do the rupee story and then we will continue.
और रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर अगर हम नजर डालें तो अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज 8 पैसे मजबूत हुआ और $1 के मुकाबले रुपया 75 रुपए 91 पैसे प्रति डॉलर पर बंद हुआ. विश्व की 6 अन्य प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में 0.48% की गिरावट से 97.94 पर कारोबार कर रहा था.
Hey, Gibi, we'll come to rupee, but before that, I just want to ask you about the flattening of the yield curve. Does it mean that the world of equities, because of a lot of experts are saying, is indicating that we are coming back into recession?
Well, that's one way of looking at it, certainly. You have to recognize that the manner in which the crude oil prices have gone up, the manner in which global inflation is at very elevated levels. One has never seen the kind of inflation level in the US like you were seeing now. Is a rating at around 8%. And the supply chain disruptions that COVID has caused, particularly in Shanghai and Shenzhen area, even though the contact industries will see some sort of a revival and see recovery, the broad contours of global economic trajectory looks very, very muted, in the sense that already United Conference of Trade and Development has actually scaled down global growth to less than 3%. Even India's economic growth is being scaled down.
Okay.
So what we are going to see is certainly an impact of combination of impact of inflation and supply chain disruption and the commodity cycle turning. Now this will certainly mean that the volumes, demand volume will be affected. The corporate earnings may still, maintain its positive growth rate, but certainly overall demand will be impacted, and that will probably cast, an impact on growth prospects. So yes, recession is a worry, but I think I am more worried by possibilities of stagflation, where you have growth capped at what you were growing at earlier, with inflation raising its ugly head once again.
So is the worst priced in, or do you think the secular up move from here on will take over? And do you think that the markets will consolidate for the rest of the year?
I think what is happening is the markets are still hopeful of the recovery conditions maintaining themselves, in the sense that the recovery that fueled the markets last year meaning this year, the fag end of the current financial year, recovery phase will continue. The corporate earnings will continue to keep growing.
Okay.
Now, and of course, inflation will depress demand a bit. Crude oil prices will upset and increase the cost of companies. But my sense is the markets are still not that despondent in terms of the growth prospects going forward.
जी, आपने इन सभी स्थितियों की बात की, चाहे वो ग्लोबल कमोडिटी प्राइसेस की बात हो, इन्फ्लेशन की बात हो, या डिमांड में थोड़ा सा कमी की बात हो, या सप्लाई चेन से भी संबंधित बातें हैं. तो ऐसे में इस वित्तीय वर्ष में अगर हम देखें तो ऐसे कौन से सेक्टर्स हैं जो कि जिनमें हम तेजी की उम्मीद थोड़ी बहुत कर सकते हैं?
देखिए, जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इंडस्ट्री जिसे हम कहते हैं, जिसे हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर है, जिसे एयरलाइन सेक्टर है, टूरिज्म सेक्टर है, या आप कमर्शियल रियलिटी सेक्टर है, क्योंकि लोग कंपनियों में ऑफिसेस में वापस आ रहे हैं, वैसे जो सेक्टर्स जो है मैं समझता हूं कि उसमें तेजी आने की उम्मीद हम कर सकते हैं.
और अब
very briefly we mentioned that rupee. Very briefly, how do you see?
I think there is a pressure on the Indian rupee, which is, in my view, is a good thing, because if the Indian rupee depreciates, Indian exports competitiveness gets a big boost, and we have already seen a year where we have crossed $400 billion of exports, which is an achievement worth emulating. And if the rupee depreciates in accordance with the overall exchange rate valuation, I think it's a good sign for Indian exports.
बात वैश्विक बाजारों की करें. एशियाई शेयर बाजारों में अगर हम देखें तो आज चीन के शेयर बाजारों में तेजी से अधिकतर एशियाई शेयर बाजार बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए. रूस यूक्रेन संघर्ष में कमी आने की बढ़ती संभावनाओं से जापान को छोड़कर एशिया के शेयर बाजारों में आज तेजी रही. येन में मजबूती के बीच जापान के निकेई सूचकांक में 0.8% की गिरावट देखने को मिली. चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में 2% का उछाल आया. हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग 1.4% चढ़ा. दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 0.2% और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स 0.3% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए. अंतर्देशीय कारोबार के दौरान यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में मिला जुला रुख रहा. लंदन के FTSE 100 में 0.1% की मामूली तेजी दिखी, जबकि फ्रांस का कैक 0.8% और जर्मनी का डेक्स 1.4% के नुकसान में चल रहे थे.
U.S. stocks rose yesterday, with the Dow and S&P logging their fourth straight session of gains. The three major U.S. share indices climbed as some progress was being made towards a deal to resolve the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index added 1%, the S&P 500 climbed 1.2%, and the Nasdaq Composite surged 1.8%. AKB, 11% surge in U.S. stocks in the past 2 weeks has the hallmarks of a bear market rally that might give you deeper losses. Is it taking towards a recession warning, or is the restrictive Fed damage the economy there?
I think the markets are gearing up for some tough days ahead, and what you are seeing right now is preparing for that eventuality. The fact that the Fed has already announced that there will be, in the full year, calendar year, would be 6 rounds of increases in rates, is still to be internalized and priced in the market. So I think both in terms of the bond market as well as the equity market in the US, the next few months would be one has to be extremely cautious.
Okay. Oil prices today climbed around 2% on supply tightness and the growing prospect of new Western sanctions against Russia, even as Moscow and Kiev held peace talks. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $112.30 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $106.50 per barrel. It could be very, very quickly. The supply tightness is there for us. So OPEC, if it increases the production, will it not solve the problem? But they're not doing it.
I think to expect and hope that OPEC will increase the production is something that nobody can actually say. I am not very hopeful that the oil price issue will be sorted out soon.
और मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में आज अप्रैल अनुबंध वाले सोने का मूल्य 310 रुपए बढ़कर 51,125 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम रहा.
AKB, thank you so much for being with us and throwing light on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we close, the headlines once again. Union Cabinet approves $808 million World Bank assisted program on raising and accelerating MSME performance. Sensex climbed more than 1% to settle above 58,600 points. Nifty finishes near the 17,500 mark. Rupee appreciates to 75 rupees and 91 paise per US dollar, and Brent crude prices rise to around 2% on supply tightness. That's all we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Till tomorrow, goodbye.
Market Buzz.